Welcome back to Phoenix Haven Garage, everyone. Today we're going to be doing the front and rear brakes on this 2017 Honda Accord. Let's go over and take a look at all the parts we're going to be using. Okay, so we have pretty much the standard Duralast brake pads and rotors from AutoZone. You can see the part numbers here. These are the rears. These are the fronts. These are the pads. I mean, he got ceramic pads. Good boy. You're also going to want some other things to get the job done. You're going to need some brake part cleaner. You're going to need some brake lubricant for the back of the pads and the caliper pins. And you're going to want some anti-seize for the wheels. That fire was lit yesterday and it's restarted. Alright, so before we get started with the job, we like to prep all the parts first. So we have the brake pads over here, so we have the brake rotors here, and we have the brake clean. And you're going to spray the entire rotor down to get the protective film off of it. These are the actually black rotors. They have extra protection out for rust because we're in the Northeast. And then after you do that, you're going to take a rag or whatever and just wipe every square inch of the rotor off and get all that material, get all that film coating off, and make sure to do that for all 4 of your rotors. So now for the pads here, we're going to use some brake quiet. These already have shins on them. They should help with the brakes not making any noise, but I found that you still want to add the brake quiet to it. It's not necessary, but if you don't want it to sound like a school bus when you stop, you're going to want to do this. And you just need a little bit on each pad. As you see, I'm just putting dots on each of them. And with a piece of extra paper or cardboard, I'm now going to just apply it to the entire back surface of the pad. There we go. So first we want to get the caliper off the mount. The rear bolt is a 14 millimeter. The nut on the side of the boot is a 19 millimeter. So go ahead and break those free. You're going to hold the one wrench on the nut with the 19 and loosen it with the 14 on the back. There's a top and a bottom as well. Do the same for both. Next thing you want to do is I have an old coat hanger here. You can use whatever you want, bungee cord, but off the springs on the top, we're going to hang the caliper from this coat hanger here. And now with a pry bar, with those 14 millimeter caliper bolts removed, you should be able to get the caliper off. Nope. There you go. Now the caliper is off. So now we're going to reset the piston here. We're going to use a wire brush first and just go over it and clean it up some. But before you do that, you want to make sure you've popped your hood, and you want to make sure that you remove the cap off the brake fluid reservoir in the back so that we can actually drive the piston home. We're going to just put a socket into the piston just to make our life a little bit easier. And with that, we're going to use this brake piston we're going to use this brake piston resetter screw here. It just kind of goes in. You can also use a C-clamp or whatever you got, but you just want to keep turning that until the piston goes all the way down and reset. So once you got it all the way home, it will stop moving, and you can loosen it up and remove the tool. And then hang the caliper from whatever you have or whatever you put on the floor to rest it on. So with the screwdriver, you can remove the pads, front and rear. There we go. Squealer is on top of the rear pad. That one looks pretty beat, yeah. Okay. And now with a 17 millimeter wrench, you're going to go ahead and loosen the 2 caliper mounting bolts. They're in the rear. Yep, there's one, and there's another one on the bottom. You're going to want to put the wrench on it and hit it with a hammer and break them free. There's one, and do the same for the bottom. Now with both bolts removed, the caliper mounting bracket will come off, just like so. We'll set that aside for now. And now we're going to tackle the screw on the rotor, and we're going to get our impact screwdriver to get that off. So we already hit that screw with some PB blast, and what Todd has here is an impact screwdriver. If you notice, this tip on the screw head is flat. It doesn't come to a point, and that's going to be really important here so we don't strip this thing out. But you're just going to hold that on there, and then you're going to hit the back of it with a hammer, and it should just twist off. There it goes, all done. If you're fighting with that and it's having a problem, You can try drilling the edge of the screw head and then tapping it with a screwdriver to turn it counterclockwise. There's a lot of different tricks out there to get those off. There's just a little bit of rust on there. We're going to throw some anti-seize on that when we reinstall. So with that, you can remove the rotor, and then we're going to take a wire brush and clean up the spindle behind it. We clean up the wire brush, hit it with some brake clean, and now we're going to take some anti-seize and just go around that lip where the rotor rests on. That will help things not rust to each other in the same place. Lubricate it, help the rotor come off next time. We've been really lucky. We haven't hit any of the rotors with any hammers. They're just coming right off. So we're going to put the countersunk hole to the hole on the rotor for the screw. We did put a little anti-seize on that and just screw it in. Do not do it tight, just enough to hold the rotor in place. The lug nuts will hold the rotor where it needs to be. That's good. You're all done. Then you won't need to use an impact screwdriver next time. Okay, so we have our caliper mounting bracket here on the bench. First thing we're going to do is remove these shims here with a pair of pliers. Just grab them and pull them off. There we go. And now with our wire brush, we're going to clean up the channels here where those mounted. Be careful not to hit the rubber boot. Alright, so we freshened up the caliper mounting bracket here. We're now going to take a little bit of the never seize and just put a little bit onto the areas of the posts where we are going to mount the shims. It's just so they don't rust. It helps keep it nice from pitting and other things. And you don't want a lot. You don't want it slopping all over the place here. So next, grab one of the shims. They're only going to go on one way. The tabs need to face inside for the tensioners on the pads. And the little channel here is going to go onto the top post. Like that. That's it. It's on. And do the same for the other side. And then to help the pads slide just a little bit so the pads don't get frozen on the caliper and then you get uneven wear, we're going to put a little bit of this never seize onto the faces of the shims here so that they can glide freely. With that all set now, we're going to inspect the guide pins here on the bracket. What you want to do is look at the boot and make sure, oh, that one's not moving. Oh, there it goes. Okay, that's good. There they go. They were a little stiff. They're going to need some grease. The boots look pretty clean. Oh yeah, that's freed it up now. Yeah, wow, they're pretty stuck. So let's take a look here. You want to grab the lip of the boot and kind of twist the pin, but you don't want to rip the boot as you do this. There it goes. Get the other side too. Quick. Just twist and pull, and the boot will release. And from there, so these look pretty bare and dry. Yeah, so these look pretty bare and dry. We're gonna add a lot of grease to these now. Boots in there, pretty empty. It's hard to see. Yeah. No, I think you just need more grease in it. And what next step is to just grease up those pins. We have right here. We have the Ultra brake parts lubricant. This is for the pins. This can also be used on any of the brake parts as well. I would put a lot on because there's none in the boot really. Goop it up good. Focus more on the tip so when you push in, it will glide down the shaft.
Yeah. But you don't want it on that rubber.
Bring it over here.
You don't want it on the rubber.
That's right. And now, just hold the boot and twist and push. Collapse the boot all the way to get the air out. Insert the pin and twist. Twist as you go. Push the boot down as you do it too. Let the air out. There you go. And use a rag to wipe off the extra grease. That's it. It should move up in and out. That's how it was. You're good.
You got air
Air.
Yeah, there's an air pocket.
So if you get any air trapped in there, just pop the pin back out. Compress the boot all the way and put the pin back in. Boot compressed. I grew an extra hand. And now you're going to remount the caliper mounting bracket. just like that, back on with the 17 millimeter bolts. So we don't know the actual torque spec here for these 17 millimeter bolts, but Hulk strength them down. You can even put some blue Loctite on them. It's good, it's on. Now we're gonna install the rear pad with the squealer side up. It's just gonna go onto the back and slide into those metal shims that we installed on the bench. It's already on the shims. And do the same for the front. So now with that in place, you can now install your caliper. It should just slide right over everything. You might have to push the caliper pins in a little bit, just as Todd did, and we'll go on. And now you can reinstall your 14 millimeter bolts. I think they were 14. And now with the 19 millimeter holding the nut, the 14 on the bolt, you can go ahead and tighten those down. Maybe 15 foot-pounds, 20 foot-pounds, just make them snug. You don't want to go crazy on these, that's good. And now you're all set to put your wheels back on, lower the car down, torque your wheels to 100 foot-pounds, and we're gonna test the front brakes. And also don't forget to remove your clothes hanger that you hung the caliper from before you put the wheel back on. All right, so I have the cap back on the brake fluid reservoir. Todd just started the car, it's in park. He's gonna push the brake pedal, it's gonna go all the way to the floor, and he's gonna bring it back up. You can use your toe to bring it back up if you need to. Pump it 3 or 4 times, and you should have brakes. Got brakes? All right, close your door. Put the car in reverse, go a couple feet, and stop.
Is there anything in the way?
No, you're clear. Let's go slow. That's good enough for now. Go forward a little bit again, and we'll do the rear. We're getting ready now to do the passenger rear side. We just did the drivers. It went pretty smooth. Before you start, there is a little 12 millimeter bolt here holding the brake, the emergency brake line to the spindle. You're gonna want to pull that one bolt out so there's some slack on the line, so that when you pull the caliper off, we can move it out and set it aside. Otherwise, you're not gonna have anywhere to really maneuver it. Just go ahead. With the 14 millimeter wrench to do the bolt on top, you need a 17 millimeter on the nut behind it. We just broke it free, but I wasn't recording. We're gonna do the same thing for the bottom one as well. Ours, the system's so rusty, we don't even need the 17. All right, with both those bolts removed, you can now use a pry bar or a screwdriver and remove the caliper. Get right off. And you see, because we loosen that line now, we can move the caliper where we need to go. So before we hang it up with the clothes hanger, we can drive the piston back in right now. We've removed the cap to the brake fluid reservoir once again. At the auto store, you can grab one of these handy dandy thingamajobs here. This will insert into the top of the piston in the grooves, and you'll be able to tighten it or screw it clockwise, and it will drive the piston back in. You could also use a pair of pliers or maybe even a screwdriver if you don't have one of these. Again, they're at AutoZone. The one thing to note is the rear brake pad has a pin on it, and the pin has to slide in through one of those grooves. So you're going to want to do them the same way. You see how it's like a cross? When you go to put this caliper back on, the one cross section is lined up with the top here, so that when it goes on, it will hit that center pin on the brake pad. I'll show that over on the bench when we get over there. But now, with this tool, it's as easy as holding the caliper and just tightening it. All right, so you see, again, after we've reset the piston, he's lined up the cross section parallel and perpendicular to the caliper there. And for the rear, you can just let the caliper kind of rest on the tie rod there, or arm. All right, and feel free to clean it up. So with a 17 millimeter wrench, we're going to go ahead and break these free. You're going to probably have to use a hammer to do this. There you go. So here's a pro tip to do this one on the back. We actually had to come through with the ratchet onto the opposite side and hit it down to get enough leverage to break that bolt free. Finally, with those two bolts out, you can remove the caliper mounting bracket, hopefully. So rusty. All right.
That one didn't even do anything either.
Yeah, it looks like one pad is frozen. Show you the pads on the side. You see how one pad's really, really overworn, and the one on my left is like brand new? Because that left pad got frozen in the channels there. So that's why we lubricate those slides. So now again, with our impact screwdriver, we're gonna hopefully get that screw out. Got it, I saw it. That impact screwdriver is a lifesaver. If we didn't have this, we'd probably be drilling that screw right now and trying to tap it to turn it. And with that off, you can remove your rotor.
Same thing with this bottom one. Look how rusty.
Yeah.
So much it.
Yeah, that bottom one we were fighting with for the caliper mounting brackets, it was rusted on there, and that's why it was so tough.
No anti-seize.
Yep. And they tell you you're supposed to use blue thread locker, actually, no anti-seize. Alright, so that aside, get your wire brush now, clean up your spindle, hit it with some brake clean, wipe it clean. And now, just like as we did with the front, we're going to put some anti-seize around the spindle just to help it all from rusting together. Put a little never-seize on the screw and put it just snug. Don't make that thing tight. You saw how many times he had to hit it to get that thing off. It shouldn't be that way. So the rears were really rusted. Take this tension spring out, and hopefully these will come out. Let's see. Yeah, right. There you go. One's out. We got the shim came right off the back of it. This front one's frozen. I'm going to try and pop it down and out. Drive it through maybe. Camera. So we use the hole punch here. Put it back on. Get this one out. Actually, probably grab it out now. No, it's on there. So rusted in. There we go. Yeah, that one's pretty much brand new still. This is the little nipple we were talking about that you have to align on the caliper piston there. So that's why we had to make sure that that cross section on that caliper was straight up and down, so that when we reinstall it, it will just slide right over that pin. All right, next, it's all the same moves as before. We're going to rip off the shims. Wire brush. And give it a once over. Again, you want to hit the surfaces here. Don't scratch up the rubber boots either. Be careful. When you're all done with this, hit it with some brake clean. Get it nice and clean. Wipe it off. All right, with the caliper bracket cleaned off now, we're going to put some anti-seize around the areas where we're going to apply the shim. Again, you just need a little bit like that. And just spread it around. Just like that. You can now take your shims that come in the kit, just like we did with the front, and install those as well. You're going to use the groove there to go on the top posts. That's it. Do the other side. There you go. Same thing as the fronts. You're going to hold the boot, pull it back, and twist the guide pin back and forth, pull up. Try not to rip the boot. There we go. Same for the other side. There we go. Let's see what we got. Yeah, a lot of crud on that one. Old grease. So just take a rag, clean up the boot area a little bit. You could even try and clean up the inside of it if you want. If you have new boots here, you can pull them off, clean up the inside of the tube. Go ahead and add grease to the pin all the way around. Be generous. And I will trade you. Interesting, that one doesn't have the top. This one.
This one does.
I know, this one doesn't. Weird.
Yeah, one does, one doesn't. It's weird.
Here we go. Pull the boot, compress it all the way to help with the air. Get it trapped, and twist and push the boot down all the way. Insert the pin, twist as you push it in. There you go. Use a rag, wipe off the excess grease. Make sure that you have movement. That floats really nicely. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to check the pads here on the bench before we reinstall it, because that one was frozen. I want to make sure the pads are able to glide through the channels unhindered. And it was the back pad, the squealer pad, was the one that was stuck. So the one that was facing the pins. So now using those 17mm bolts, go ahead and reinstall the bracket onto the car. And now, just like you did on the bench, attempt to reinstall the pads. So we had some problems getting the pads installed. They're just a little bit too long. I did it on the front one on the car. We couldn't get it on, even though we were able to do it here on the bench. So again, I'm just going to skim the top of this just ever so slightly to help this go on. You want to do a little at a time. If you need to take a little more off, take a little more off. So with that in place now, we can take the caliper and use our 14mm bolts to remount the caliper. And with all that grinding excitement, we almost forgot to put our tensioner springs onto the pads. These are just going to clip it to the little holes on the ends of the brake pads. There's two on the top, one on each pad. They sit just like that on there. You saw when we took the brakes off, it only had one. The person who installed the last time only put one on each side. We're doing both. And there it is. And then put in the 14mm bolts to about 15 foot-pounds. And finally, you're going to want to reattach the emergency brake line with that 12mm nut that we removed at the beginning of all this. With all that being done now, you can put your tire back on, get the car back out of the ground, and torque it to 100 foot-pounds. So make sure to put the cap back on the brake fluid reservoir. Okay, once again, we're going to leave the car in park and start it. And now pump the brakes. It should go to the floor probably. Pull it back up if you need to. Pump it 3 or 4 times. You should have a solid brake pedal. Feels good. Close your door. Put her in reverse. Go back a little bit and see how it goes. Looks good. We're going to take it for a spin, but that should do it. So, hope this video helped you out. Please subscribe to the channel. Please give a thumbs up if it helped you and you enjoyed it. And take care, everyone.